Welcome to The Business on Radio Verulam, the voice of your local business community.
Hello and good evening and welcome to The Business. I'm Trevor Merriden with the show that's essential listening for the West Herts business community. How many times have we heard the phrase, we just can't find the staff in our everyday working lives? Too many times we bet, and this is what our show is all about this week. How businesses can find the people they need, and specifically, how they can make more of underused pools of talent. We've got the Telegraph's Deputy Women's Editor, Louisa Peacock, telling us how we can get more from women in the workplace. Richard Watts OBE, Director of Ex-Forces, will tell us all about their schemes to encourage those leaving the armed forces to set up their own businesses and hire others from the same background. Then there's Catherine Sermon from Business in the Community. She'll be talking about their campaign called Ban the Box, aimed at removing that tick box from job application forms that ask you about criminal convictions, and Claire Crux from the University of Hertfordshire's Career Placement Service will reveal how businesses and students could find each other more effectively. Joining us throughout the show will be Dr. Jill Miller, Research Advisor at the CIPD. Her research focuses on the role of people management in driving SME growth. So clearly the perfect person to help us make sense of how perhaps we can, after all, find the staff we need. There's so much in this show that I'm afraid it might well sort of burst at the seams. There's a lot to get through in the next hour. And helping me along, as always, is Claire McAnulty. Hello, Claire. How's things with you?
Yes, very busy this week, so yeah.
Anything caught your attention in the business news?
Yeah, I noticed actually on BBC Business News that, did you realise there had been a self-employment boom? Right. There were reports that the last quarter of 2013, so just last year, they worked out that there was over 4 million, that's 1 in 7 of British workers working for themselves. So It's a big number. The biggest increase has actually taken place since around the middle of 2011. There was actually a 60% increase in 2011. Right. So not exactly a coincidence. There was a lot of job losses about that time, and it just sort of made me wonder, is it the case that maybe a lot of people that were made redundant around about 2011 perhaps just decided to take matters into their own hand, and maybe they're better off being self-employed than not employed, or being employed in a job perhaps where they don't feel very secure. Then sort of thought a bit about some of the reasons. Possibly the internet's made it easier for businesses to start up. There's less geographical barriers to a lot of businesses starting. Have you got any ideas on it?
Well, there's certainly self-employed people everywhere in sheds, home offices, Costa Coffee. I think we see them sort of everywhere really. I mean, a lot of people sort of working all over the place, either becoming increasingly flexible, working for somebody else, or working in their own businesses. I mean, I think there's certain things that are lending themselves more naturally. A flatter hierarchy in businesses generally. It doesn't really matter, where you work. We've broken down this kind of link between being around a particular place. It's easy. It's never been easier to set up a business than before.
I think too. There's a physical thing that you don't actually physically need to be able to go into, say, London, or physically have to. You can still conduct business from your own house. There's a lot of e-commerce businesses, but I mean, that's a vast increase. I mean, 1 in 7 people. That's incredible when you think about it. It
is, and I just feel like there's a sort of. I mean, it's partly the reason that we've got this programme in the first place, really, is we kind of feel this kind of upsurge of interest in sort of small business issues. I just think I wonder whether it's also a stage of life thing as well, that maybe a lot of people who were losing their jobs 2 or 3 years ago were at the stage where they just thought, you know what, I don't think I actually want to go and work for anybody. I mean, I remember having a conversation with my wife, and she said, and I said, I'm fed up with working for idiots. No disrespect to previous employers. I said, I'm fed up with working for idiots. She said, that's right, you want to be that idiot. And in a way, I think I could get what she meant. It's the sort of thing that only a wife could say, a spouse could say to their partner. But I think, but in terms of doing it, it's not a feeling of being an idiot. It's actually a feeling of actually having some control back in your life.
I think too, a lot of these jobs have been extremely well paid. A lot of the city jobs have been extremely well paid. So possibly when people have been made redundant, they've been made redundant with fairly substantial financial packages, which have allowed them. Maybe they've even been thinking for years of being self-employed, but this has kind of given them the nudge that they needed. Perhaps difficult to say.
I think that's right. I'll tell you what I noticed. I noticed that a survey from Gartner predicted that by 2017, at least 50% of employees will bring their own devices, as in sort of internet-enabled phones, laptops, tablets, to work. And what this means is it's not just employers can save money because people will be bringing their own stuff, but it actually opens up this whole area of mobile learning, which is starting to be a bit of a big thing about there's a certain amount of convenience and flexibility, ability to repeat specific parts of training until the topic's understood. And it's not a perfect way of learning, but it's another bit of the armoury. And I think for small businesses in particular, that may only have one person to train all their employees, and there's not very much in the way of resources. The sort of mobile learning brings quite an interesting sort of dynamic to the whole thing. And I wonder also, related to the theme of this show, whether it might also affect the type of person who may be employed. Somebody who's got that kind of fluid mindset that training's not something that's just done to them, it's just something that they actually have this kind of self-learning sort of philosophy, that this kind of idea of everlasting employability, that you actually sort of go through your life and you're just learning and picking up bits, and you might be in many different jobs.
I think this mobile learning is definitely gathering pace, and actually a friend of mine, a cameraman that I used to work with, he teaches in one of the universities, so he teaches television courses in one of the universities, and this university is what they're planning to do is have the first year at university a remote learning. So that they can get lots of, say, foreign students doing courses, but the first year they don't need to come to Britain to do the first bit of the course. So there's a lot of video and audio that they can do at home. So this definitely seems to be a growing market.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll be talking a bit more about all different forms of employment, particularly tapping into those underused talent pools. And we'll be back right after these announcements.
Hi, this is Danny Smith. Join me weekdays from 4 till 7 p.m. for West Hart's Drive Time, with features including Chris's Film Club, Pound Saver, Community Notice Board, Calendar Artist, Hot Topics and many more besides. We also feature correspondence covering topics such as lifestyle, consumer advice, cooking, interior design and travel. We have regular interviews, local news and sports, celebrity birthdays, travel and traffic updates and competitions as well. That's all on West Hart's Drive Time with me, Danny Smith, on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
Has your child outgrown day nursery? Would you like them to attend a more structured environment with a wide range of interesting and challenging activities?
I like cooking stuff with Mrs. Federici.
Mount Carmel Kindergarten in Sandpit Lane is now offering extended sessions, so even if you work, your child can enjoy an outstanding environment that prepares them for school and is somewhere they will want to go to every day.
I like playing games. I love my teachers.
For more, see our website at mountcarmelkindergarten.co.uk. Mount Carmel Kindergarten, private education for little people.
Mount Carmel Kindergarten.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Welcome back to the business. It's about 10 minutes past the hour. Now, we want to hear your views as well, so do get in contact on our studio number, which is 01727 839 926, Twitter at RVTheBusiness, or on our email, which is thebusiness@radioverulam.com. I almost forgot it there. I can't believe that. I've said it so many times. How could I forget that? But what we're going to do now is start to get into the sort of the meat of our show, and in terms of what we were talking about at the beginning about we can't just find the staff, and is that really true, or are we just not looking in the right places? And Claire's going to kick us off.
Yes, so we have a new presenter in Radio Verulam, Louisa Peacock. Louisa Peacock is the Telegraph's deputy women's editor, and her programme called Outspoken goes out on a Tuesday evening on Radio Verulam now between 7 and 8. It's a very good listen, particularly if you're wanting to find out about local news. And I started by asking Louisa how she came to be in her current job.
I actually started off as a journalist about 10 years ago now, and I wrote about employment through the recession, unfortunately, a lack of employment, and I sort of knew a lot about unemployment and the barriers people face to get back into work. And then increasingly I wrote about women in sort of top jobs, or sort of why there aren't as many women as there should be in our boardrooms, and even in politics. You know, if you look at the general spectrum, it's abysmal, really. There's four women MPs in the cabinet, and if you look at business, it's something like 20% of the positions at the top are taken by women. So I became more and more interested in that, and over the years just sort of slowly but surely started talking about women's issues a bit more, and that led me into the deputy women's editor role at the Telegraph now. But so I've got a bit of a background of employment and women.
The programme tonight really is about underused talent, so people perhaps who, for one reason or another, their talent is underused. I mean, would you class women as being, in general, underused talent, and if so, in what way?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I think part of the issue, which I've written about a lot, is that women themselves tend to hold themselves back and undervalue their skills. So men are very good at shouting about what they're great at. They ask their bosses for a promotion. They deserve a pay rise. They're ready for the next thing. They make everyone sure and aware of that. Women tend to sort of lean out and don't contribute to the conversation, or they don't sort of sit at the table, sit at the same table as men. So they don't generally ask for a pay rise. I bet if you ask any of your female friends have they ever asked for a pay rise, many of them will say no, whereas the men, like I say, would have done. So there is a bit of sort of self-confidence, self-doubt issues that women generally have to deal with more than men, and I think that contributes a little bit to them being underused. But there are also clearly some barriers that they face which they can't help, which are societal barriers in terms of trying to get back into the workplace and being unable to because of various structural problems. And I'm talking there largely about childcare. Childcare is by far the biggest barrier to women getting back to work and getting into a senior job. So it's a depressing statement to make, I'm aware, but it is one of those things that still in the 21st century holds women back.
And I'm wondering though if now things are getting slightly better for women, given that because of the internet and the fact that things can be done from home in a way that it wasn't done before, that perhaps allows maybe part-time work from home, which would maybe suit women with families. Do you think it's getting better in those areas?
I think it's definitely changing, but I would say part-time work is still very much seen as a dirty thing to do. If you're a part-timer, there's this sort of stigma around it that you are only half-hearted, you're only half involved in the job. And a lot of women still face that. I think in the sort of more forward-thinking companies, the younger SMEs and startups out there, sort of younger generation, I think that attitude has largely gone. But it's mainly the sort of big, large employers, the big FTSE employers, where that's still very much the deal. You have to be in the workforce. It's this thing called presenteeism. You have to be present to be believed that you're actually working. And if you're not, if you're at home or you're only half working half of the week, there is this stigma around it. But that is changing. There is actually a group called TimeWise. It's the TimeWise Foundation, and they've just started running this part-time power list to prove to the world that, you can be powerful and earn lots of money and be part-time. And there are men on that list too. It's really important to make that point, that it's not just women who should take part-time jobs. Men also either want to look after their family or just take time out. Not every woman wants to work part-time because she has kids. There might be other reasons. So I think it is changing, but there's still a bit of a stigma there with it, unfortunately.
I'm delighted that we now have in our studio to help us sort of pick through these issues, Dr. Jill Miller, who's a research advisor at the CIPD. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the show. And I understand that your research sort of focuses on the role of people management in driving SME growth. So I guess you're the perfect person. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sure. So I work for the CIPD, which we're a professional body for great people management and development. A large proportion of our members, and we've got 135,000 members worldwide, a large proportion of those are SMEs.
Great.
So I've got the privilege of working with many small businesses, looking at how they manage, recruit and train their people.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I mean, what did you both think, Claire and Jill, about that first interview with Louisa? I mean, Louisa seemed to be implying that to a certain extent women hold themselves back. I mean, how do you feel?
I think it does depend what industry you're in. I used to work in media, and there were certainly quite a number of women that I worked with who were pretty good at sort of making themselves heard. I do know what she means though, which is that it's not really the done thing for a woman to promote themselves, and it's a bit uncomfortable. You know, you do feel a bit uncomfortable doing that, and that's possibly a little bit of what she means. They don't sort of push themselves forward so much, perhaps.
Yeah, would you agree with that, Jill?
I think it's as Louisa alluded to, it's quite a complex issue. I think one of the big things is for women is trying to balance the work and your home life. And I think with an ageing population, it's not just childcare we're looking at, it's also caring for elderly relatives as well. So I think it's important that employers really do work with staff to help them strike that balance.
No, I'd agree with that.
I think the biggest thing really is that the minute a woman has a child, I think that does change. That changes everything really, and I think that's when it becomes quite tricky for women.
Yeah. Have you? I mean, just think about women not very good about asking for pay rises. I mean, I mean, it's not been my experience, but I mean, I used to ask for pay rises all the time. I was almost continually rebuffed. But I mean, I don't. It doesn't strike me as quite right. But what do you think?
I know that. I mean, I was involved with a group of people, but we asked for a pay rise, but it was very much a group effort.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would have gone solely myself to ask for a pay rise, but because there was a small group of us, it felt a bit more comfortable, and we had all our logic, all the reasons why. Yeah. But again, I do kind of know what she means. I don't know that I would go myself and demand a pay rise.
Yeah. Oh well, okay, right. What we'll do is we're going to move on now to hear from Richard Watts OBE. Now he's Richard Watts is the director of X-Forces, and X-Forces encourages those leaving the armed forces to set up their own businesses, and of course then perhaps go on to hire others from the same background. And I started by asking Richard whether the perception that many of the ex-services have trouble adjusting to life in City Street was a bit of a myth or a reality.
I think a bit of both. I mean, you've got to bear in mind that 39% of service leavers each year have only served for 4 years or less. So a lot of them are very young individuals. They've had a lot of extreme experience in a short time. And we find that statistically some of them take longer to adjust, whereas those that serve longer tend to find it easier to get into employment and to get themselves onto a level footing. And I think that that's partly due to the institutional nature of the military, and for some people it takes a while for them to really get a sense of the fact that they're on their own almost, or a feeling that they're on their own and they've got to make their own decisions, which in the past they perhaps haven't had to.
Right. And do you, I mean, in terms of your own personal experience, I mean, I understand that you were in the armed forces for quite some time. Did you personally find it difficult to make an adjustment?
I didn't. I think that there were times though when you would possibly have some doubts about how your experience was relevant to the situation you found yourself in. But actually, you rapidly realise that so trust your instinct, and the training and experience that I had in the armed forces over 25 years was extremely relevant to the situation I found myself in the boardroom as a management consultant, which is what I was doing, and so. You can gain that confidence very quickly once you realise you can add value. But you're right in terms of the perception, potential stereotyping that some people have who have no experience of the armed forces as to how people can add value. And I think that's one of the things that we're always trying to ensure we overcome. And when you look at the capabilities and experience that a lot of armed forces people gain in a very short time, they can add huge value to any business, in my view.
Yeah, and also add value in creating business. I mean, that's the essential thing. I mean, do armed forces folks sort of lend themselves more naturally as sort of entrepreneurs? Is this a great sort of undiscovered area of entrepreneurs, do you think?
I think it is, and that's why in Ex-Forces we want to encourage people to start up their own business, because I think it is perceived as being something that perhaps I don't know anything about the commercial world, and how am I going to deal with all these issues of loans, etc. Whereas really, a lot of the training and experience that the service person has had, in particular in their ability to plan and to work to a routine and work under pressure, is really great traits for an entrepreneur. And running their own business. So we help them over that hurdle, because I think if we can help people in their business plans and where they want to get to, and then also helping them with loans, access to startup loans company, that gets them moving. Once they're moving, they gain confidence and away they go. So I think there is a lot of capability there. I think it is untapped, and I think a lot of that is purely down to a degree of not knowing what the requirements are almost of an entrepreneur, and what does it take to start up a business. So that's where we're trying to fill that gap.
Right. And so would you be able to give me a bit more detail of precisely the current initiatives you've sort of got on the go? Because I'm sure there'll be people out there listening who are thinking precisely that, is, you know, I'm out of the armed forces, and can I bridge that gap?
Yeah, sure. So we're here to help the whole armed forces community, which, just so you're aware, that's people who served in the reserves and the regular, and their families, partners and spouses as well. So it's a big community. But we aim initially, for example, before people are leaving, we're going to be involved now in training, in part of the training and transition process, where we're going to actually be able to say, look, this is some of the issues, these are some of the challenges for those of you that are interested in starting your own business, and we can help you through those hoops. So then when people register with us, and at the moment we've got 600 candidates registered, 300 of which are looking to start a business, and so far we've had nearly 50 actually launched. We're helping them through what other people perceive as the complexities of a business plan and a cash flow, etc. What does that actually mean? So we advise them through that process. We help them quickly build their business plan, and then we're a provider for the startup loans company. So we have a direct relationship with startup loans companies, so we can get them access to funding should they require it. And you know, the average sort of loan that we're looking at is about £6,000.
Oh, really?
Some people it's more, some people it's less. And then once they're then starting, we're then mentoring them, and so we mentor them through their first year of business and beyond as well. The idea being that they then become successful. We're creating a community, and they can then start mentoring startups themselves and starting to put something back in as well themselves, which people are keen to do. So it's getting them through those first hurdles. It's giving them some good business mentoring advice, but very clearly based on the principle of advice, not making the decisions for them, so that they can build their business successfully.
That was Richard Watts, the director of Ex-Forces, and I said his business is, or the business he's involved with, encourages those leaving the armed forces to set up their own businesses, and of course hire others from the same background. That's really interesting, really interesting stuff. Yes, what a talent pool there, if you think about it.
Yeah, and actually, I would imagine somebody from the services would be a fantastic employee. You know, would be very disciplined, very organised. All those types of things. So I think we would be very good employees.
Yeah. What do you think, Jill?
Yeah, no, I think as well we have to look at the kind of skill set that ex-military personnel would come to a business with, and I think as you mentioned, there's the attitude, the discipline, the intensive training they've been through, which means they mostly work well under pressure, think laterally, and can problem solve for your business, which I think is really key in a small business. Yeah. And ultimately used to very hard work, and have, I suppose, what we sometimes term as the esprit de corps, so the teamwork element, which I think in a small business, a family-run business, that's definitely what we're looking for. Yeah,
I think so. I do love this idea about ex-force business. I mean, if it's true or partially true that you know, people from the services sometimes have trouble adjusting then if you then encourage them to do something that they're really good at, like being very disciplined in setting up a business. A lot of business is about discipline, self-discipline in the way you set it up and you structure it and you organise it. It's not just about entrepreneurial flair. If you do that, and then that kind of opens up, it's probably route one to actually employ a whole load more people. Yeah. So it kind of it's got a sort of trickle down effect, I guess.
Yeah, I think as Jill said, the only difficulty I would see is maybe just adapting, but actually in terms of their skill set, they have an amazing skill set. I would imagine.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the things maybe that employers may need a bit of help with, and I think this definitely isn't a barrier, something with some advice they can really tackle, is when you get civilian employees need help perhaps translating a military CV, where say if it says an officer as someone's job, what does that actually mean in practice? And I think there's some great organisations like the British Forces Resettlement Service who can offer that kind of advice to an employer to make it an easy transition. Yeah,
the trouble is, I think that there's been certain stereotypes around about the military sort of profession. Some people think Windsor Davis, it ain't half Hotma, all that kind of, somebody's going to employ somebody, they're just going to spend their time shouting at each other. And I think that is just so out of date now, because just talking to Richard Watts, you just saw somebody who was, you have to be a completely different sort of person. There's so much of armed services now is also about human relations, in terms of what you're doing, whether you're dealing with people on the ground or dealing with each other, and it's not all kind of just square bashing and all that sort of stuff. So maybe our perceptions are sort of lagging the reality.
I think too, one thing that Jill flagged up really was the teamwork. People are used to working in teams, used to working together, all those types of things, and that's a big thing in the army, because the army can't survive without that. So that's an incredible skill to bring into any workplace.
Absolutely. Right, we are just going to have a break, but before we do, I should just mention the X-Forces website. It's http the usual colon and slash things, and then x-forces.com. They've got a number of 0207 022 0600, and you can get them on Twitter on at official X-Forces. Official X-Forces. Okay, we're just about to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
If you want to know what's going on in St Albans and West Herts, then join Telegraph journalist Louisa Peacock as she debates the local current affairs and news of the week with live guests every Tuesday from 7 p.m. right here on 92.6 FM Radio Verulam. Tweet along with the show at RV Outspoken or at Louisa Peacock. Outspoken, Radio Verulam's local news and current affairs show with Louisa Peacock, Tuesdays 7 p.m. right here on 92.6 FM Radio Verulam.
Hi, I'm Kathy Weston.
And I'm Lydia El Khoury.
Join us every Thursday evening on The Parent Show for expert interviews, local information about caring for children in West Herts,
and a What's On guide you just can't afford to miss. We're here every Thursday between 8 and 9 p.m. on Radio Verulam 92.6 FM.
Don't forget to tune in!
Looking for something fun to do? Or fancy taking up a new hobby? Join me, Ellie O'Feara, and my lovely guests as we'll explore the very best activities on offer and things to do in our local area. This Friday from midday on 92.6 FM Radio Verulam.
Radio Verulam Community Partners.
People living with cancer or life-threatening illness can often feel isolated, confused and alone. Grove House in Waverley Road, St Albans leads the way in offering free specialist care and support to patients and their families affected by cancer and life-threatening illness in St Albans, Harpenden and Dacorum. To find out more about their services, or how you can become a volunteer, or make a regular donation, or leave a gift in your will, phone 01727 731 000 or visit grove-house.org.uk.
For more on Radio Verulam Community Partners, go to radioverulam.com/community partners.
You're listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. We're the voice of the local business community on 92.6 FM and on radioverulam.com.
Welcome back to the business. I'm here in the studio with Claire McAnulty and Dr. Jill Miller from the CIPD, which is, of course, the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development. Did I get that right, Jill?
Yes,
good,
indeed.
Right, okay, that's a relief. Now we're going to move on with our theme of making the most of sort of underused talent pools, and I'm going to be talking to Catherine Sermon from Ban the Box, which is part of business in the community. I hope she's on the line now. Are you there, Catherine?
Hi, Trevor.
Hi there. And maybe you could start? Could you just tell us what is Ban the Box?
Ban the Box is a campaign run by Business in the Community in the UK, encouraging employers to remove the tick box asking people to declare unspent convictions in their recruitment processes.
Yeah.
And basically it's just about giving people a fairer chance to get into jobs and not sort of asking employers not to automatically exclude or deselect over 9 million people in the UK from their jobs.
Right. I have to say, I was really struck by the fantastic advertising that you did. It doesn't quite come across, but I'm going to try. Hopefully, by technical wizardry, I'll probably fall flat on my face now. To actually play a little bit of the ad, and then maybe we could just sort of talk about the sort of the thinking behind that, if that's okay.
Right.
Okay. Let's see if we can get that going.
Well,
here we go.
Got out of Wandsworth Prison about 6 months ago. And that's been tough, but kind of knew it would be. I'm feeling pretty positive about the future. Being inside, it gives you time to think about things. I took loads of courses, and since I've been out, I've been doing some volunteer work. I feel like I've got a lot to offer, just need a job to prove it. A lot of people just write me off pretty much straight away as soon as they hear that I've been inside. But, today's been different. Thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for listening.
And the remarkable thing about that ad is you just heard the first bit of the ad, and of course what it's got on there. I mean, Catherine, maybe you can explain sort of why that's sort of significant, because there's a little thing in the corner, isn't there, of that ad which says sort of skip this ad. Do you want to sort of just mention that to us?
Yes, I mean, we were really lucky when we launched the campaign. We were supported by the creative agency Leo Burnett, and they did some work for us pro bono, and they were kind of sort of using the Google technology or the YouTube technology of kind of skip the ad button that you have when when you go on to watch something, and before you get to watch what you want to watch, you get the option to skip over the advertising.
Yeah.
And so we know a lot of people actually when they first see it, they don't know that's what they're meant to be seeing, so they kind of go to skip over it. And as you do that, it interrupts the guy who's speaking, and it really, I mean, he's sitting there in an interview setting, and what it's doing is giving people the opportunity to react and respond as they would if that was them, and as you kind of click on it, he gets more agitated and slightly more despondent, I guess, about the recruitment opportunity.
Because no one's listening to him, and so they're just kind of they're moving on, and I suppose it's showing that how quickly we make a judgment on people.
Absolutely. I mean, the principle of it, and absolutely the key principle here is that it takes sort of 30 seconds to write off an ex-offender.
Yeah.
It's something that I think we all build up kind of prejudice over time, and convictions cover such a wide spectrum of offences, and I think it's really easy for people to kind of picture the worst and not really give people a chance to explain, the context or the journey that they've travelled since.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it from the point of view of the employers, I mean, you can understand though, can't you? I mean, I'm going to be devil's advocate here, that you can understand the sort of the reservations that an employer must have. I mean, so firstly, if we take it on the sort of, the level, the thinking and thought process as to why they might not want to, give a chance to an ex-offender. But I mean, how have you sort of countered that?
Well, I mean, I think it's. Of course, we understand that people might have reservations, but I think I'd expect people to have more of a problem with what we're suggesting. If we said we were banning, suggesting companies ban disclosure of convictions in their entirety, but that's not what we're asking at all. We're really realistic about how businesses should look at the issue. What we're asking companies to do is not automatically exclude ex-offenders from applying for their jobs in the first place. And a lot of companies that have online recruitment processes will have this tick box as part of their form, and as soon as you tick it, people are automatically deselected from the rest of the process. We know there are lots of companies, smaller companies or other companies that don't have such, kind of online processes and that deselection, but actually we know that what we're trying to do is get people to question the prejudices in their heads and to put that to one side and give people, judge people on their skills and abilities first, which I think is what we should ask all people to do really anyway. And then further down the recruitment process, if a candidate is more successful, is getting into, kind of final round or wherever it seems appropriate, then to look at convictions and look at how we can support employers in interpreting that.
Yeah. I think Dr. Jill Miller wants to come in.
Yes, I just had a question about taking that box away. What effect do you think that's going to have on the numbers of ex-offenders who get into employment a lot easier?
Well, there was some brilliant evidence actually from the States. We have built on a campaign that was launched actually initially in America. And there's a state, I think it's Minneapolis, where prior to the Ban the Box campaign, they had about less than 6% of people with convictions for getting into employment. And following a number of years of the campaign, and actually there it was led, public sector led, and it was kind of mandated through legislation, it was nearer 60% of people with convictions were getting into employment, and which just says to me, really candidly, there are people with great skills and talent who are, absolutely great employees. Otherwise, they wouldn't still be in employment. And that's what's showing us that we think businesses are missing out on some really skilled talent.
Okay.
And I think as well, Catherine, this is Claire here. In terms of offenders not reoffending, then actually having a job and having something that's earning them money, that's giving them self-respect, is actually doing more than simply giving them a living, isn't it?
Yes, the reoffending rates, if you don't work in the area and you've never come across it, I think most people are staggered. Reoffending rates for those who are sentenced to a year or less in custody at the moment is about 70%. And that just means people are struggling to get back into mainstream society, and actually employment is proven to reduce reoffending by up to about 50%. So we know it can make a really, really significant difference, particularly on those people whose conviction really isn't a fair reflection of their ability to work or their true character.
Right, and what about? There's the sort of open stigma that people might feel or express. But what about what can we do about the stigma under the surface, where actually there's nothing said or nothing spoken, but actually that as soon as somebody says something like that in an interview or in other some other sort of medium, where actually they are sort of mentally sort of written off by the interviewer. I know that actually that there's a sort of, on the surface, of course we wouldn't discount you for that reason, but actually once that person's gone, they do.
Well, I think this is all part of the culture change, and I guess that's why you're exploring the topic of discussion tonight, and not just talking to me. I think we find that we're all kind of making decisions and based on some judgments, and for me that's why it's so important just to have this conversation more frequently. I think whenever I've spoken to people, and sometimes just whether it's people in business or whether it's just my friends and family, they're really surprised by the scale of this. So we're saying it's over 9 million people in the UK who've got a criminal conviction.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, 80% of that also is people who've just had a fine handed down from the court.
Yeah.
But those people still have to declare that conviction for a certain period of time following when it was handed down. And actually, I think the other bit that surprises people is that, again, if you're not close to it, you just don't realise these things. And I certainly didn't before I started working in the field, is that once you've been in prison, actually, anyone who's been in prison at the moment, according to the law, if you've been in prison for more than 2.5 years, the conviction, you have to declare that for the rest of your life.
Right.
So, but I think most people think in our society today that if you go to prison, you serve your time, that you've served that time, and then when you leave those prison gates, you're ready to move on, and that society should be ready to help you move on and support you in that way.
So every sentence is a life sentence in a way.
It depends on the sentence. But anyone, I would say it's sort of anyone who's been in prison for over 2.5 years at the moment has to declare that, as you say, for life. And I think actually a lot of people who have these sentences don't realise that at the time and feel really unfairly disadvantaged against them that when they come out and they want to move on, or actually, kind of recognise. I mean, I know one of the other issues you're going to cover tonight is about youth unemployment.
Yes.
And actually recognise that offending behaviour peaks in adolescence, and a lot of the kind of crazy, petty things that might happen in your teenage years.
There's been so many.
Don't worry, Trevor, we won't ask you about it. But that could disadvantage you in such a serious way for the rest of your life. And I mean, we're really encouraged. I mean, the government are, and one of the other reasons we were prompted to run the campaign is that the legislation is changing this year. That for that declaration period is being reduced. Different declaration periods for different kind of crimes. And we really, really support what the government's doing with that. And actually, this is where we felt employers could make a kind of reciprocal kind of move to support people to reintegrate back in society and make a positive contribution.
Wonderful. Okay, what can people do to back the campaign? I mean, you've got a website address, obviously, that you presumably want to tell us about.
Yes, we have a website address. I mean, it's Business in the Community's website. So it's www.bitc.org.uk/Vanderbox.
Yeah.
And there are loads of resources on there. Frequently asked questions is probably the best starting point. The video that you played is on there.
Yeah.
We're actually also running a number of webinars, so I know, if you've got listeners wherever they are, they'll be able to access those webinars and resources and support around really practical support about, well, when do I ask and how, or what's the nitty-gritty legal stuff that I should understand.
Yeah.
And I just would really encourage people to look at that and look at the case studies. We've got everything from, Freshfields, an enormous law firm that Vanderbox,
yeah.
and companies like Alliance Boots who are supporting the campaign, who employ thousands of people every year, through to, we've got smaller companies where maybe their processes are less formal, but actually they're saying, well, this is about the message we can send out by having a really accessible recruitment process. So people like True Story, who are a small creative agency, or NBC Bird and Pest Control, one of my favourite ones that have found the box, because they're just saying, actually, we can look at this on a case-by-case basis, depending on where, then the role that we're going to be employing people in and where they're going to be.
Right, brilliant. Okay, and we want you to stay with us for when we play our next clip, if that's okay, in terms of the next area of underused talent, in terms of younger workers. Are you okay to stay on for that?
Yes, great.
Okay, I will come back to you straight after this.
On Radio Verulam is with you on Saturday mornings between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Join Derek Staines and Stephen Hall as they flash you back, value discs, have a brief biog and interview the stars. We also allow SJH to ramble down nostalgia lane. It's all on the Premier Oldies show here on 92.6 FM. The Solid Gold Music Show, sponsored by Dock Guard of Luton.
Hi, this is Danny Smith. Join me weekdays from 4 till 7 p.m. for West Harts Drive Time, with features including Chris's Film Club, Pound Saver, Community Notice Board, Calendar Artist, Hot Topics and many more besides. We also feature correspondence covering topics such as lifestyle, consumer advice, cooking, interior design and travel. We have regular interviews, local news and sports, celebrity birthdays, travel and traffic updates and competitions as well. That's all on West Harts Drive Time with me, Danny Smith, on 92.6 FM, Radio Verulam.
If you want to get in touch with the business on Radio Verulam, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.
Welcome back to the business. It's now just after 1:45 the hour. We're looking at underused talent pools, and we've looked at a number so far. Now we're moving on to younger workers or potential workers in the marketplace. Claire, do you want to introduce us?
Yes, we had Claire Crux on earlier, probably a couple of months ago now. Claire is a team leader placements officer at the University of Hertfordshire, and although you might not think it, you would imagine that for young people that there isn't any problem in getting employed, but we had a word with Claire and we asked her to tell us about what the University of Hertfordshire is doing to promote their graduates to potential employers.
The role of the Careers and Placement Service at the University of Hertfordshire is to make sure that all of our students are getting jobs both locally and nationally. So my role in particular is to work with employers, national and local employers, to make sure that their jobs are advertised and that our students are finding work when they leave the university.
In general, is there concern from employers about employing recently qualified graduates, would you say?
There's some differences at the moment. The number of graduates actually going into employment is increasing, but obviously we've been through some quite lean times recently, and I think employers do have concerns about maybe the quality of graduates coming out of universities at the moment. But the University of Hertfordshire is really keen to make sure that employability is really high on our agenda so that we are turning out graduates who are very, very employable for businesses.
You've obviously worked at university for a number of years. Is there anything decision that you took maybe when you started off that you wouldn't take now, that you would maybe do things slightly differently?
I think probably one of the key things that we now do differently is we try to do a lot more with businesses on an individual basis. So before there was kind of the expectation that businesses would come to the University of Hertfordshire, they would find us. But now we've recognised that we actually do a lot more. So a business decision is to, have more university staff going out, networking with businesses, making sure they understand the services. And that's quite a key change from a few years ago. We're more of a business-facing university than we ever have been. And we're more dedicated to make sure that we're working with both local and national employers.
How do you find your students are? Are they fairly well clued up now that they really have to already be applying for jobs? They don't wait until they graduate, do they? Or do you help with that?
Yeah, they kind of fall into two trains of thought, really. You've got really keen beings that know exactly what's going on, and they're applying right now for jobs that they're going to have in 9 months' time. But we've still got a lot of work to do with students that maybe want to concentrate on their studies and leave applying for a job until they've actually finished their degree. So we try really hard to make sure that they know that they do need to start early and that they can't leave everything to the last minute. They're getting better, but there's still a process of education to make sure they're all doing what they should be doing nice and early.
Nice and early, I like that. So Claire Crux, the University of Hertfordshire Career Placement Service. In the studio with me I have Dr Jill Miller from the CIPD and Clare McAnulty, and still on the line Catherine Sermon from Business in the Community. Now Catherine, your organisation sort of covers this area as well in a way, dealing with sort of younger workers. I mean, did you have a sort of view on what you heard there?
Yes, I mean I think Claire's view is obviously driven about graduates coming from her position, but we find this as an issue facing young people as a whole, and I think some of the issues around youth unemployment are very well documented. I mean, the key thing for us is looking at, and we're working closely with Job Centre Plus on this, on an initiative called Generation Talent, but is that employers might really unwittingly be disadvantaging young people, and that's not really, it's about saying it's not a conscious decision, but actually how, if we raise awareness of this, can we help people think about just small steps that they can take that might make a difference. And an example I'd use is actually young people, the evidence shows that they rely much more heavily than the average UK sort of job seeker on formal methods of recruitment. So they rely on, where people advertise, how they do it, and particularly, let's say, the job centre is the place to go. And I think we're all aware, when you've been in work and you've built a network around you of people who know what you can do, and a lot of people find work informally. They might ask around, or they might have people who would headhunt them. And actually, for young people, if they can't get into work, they get caught on this cycle then of not being able to get into work at all, because all the jobs that they find are either asking for a certain number of years' experience, or actually a lot of the jobs that are happening lately aren't even advertised.
Right.
So that's where we're really encouraging employers to look to the job centre as a place to advertise.
Okay.
It really is the primary route that young people would use.
Right, and I think, Jill, you're also sort of working in this area as well with the CIPD.
Yes. At the CIPD, we have a large-scale programme of work called our Learning to Work campaign, which helps to get young people into work and tackle youth unemployment. And we've got some great resources for businesses, such as guidance on apprenticeship schemes, hiring younger workers, mentoring young people. It really brings things to life. And I think from a personal point of view as well, I started off my career in a small organisation. I think we're about 30 people when I joined, and I think for young people working for an SME in particular can be a really big thing for your career start, opportunity to work in loads of different parts of the business. But I think one of the things from an employer's point of view is that employing young people shouldn't be seen as employing someone on a low salary. That's not the point of it. It actually is a long-term investment, getting talent and skills into the business. And some of our CIPD work is, I think the staggering figure that 4/5 of businesses are saying that they're having recruitment difficulties for certain skills. So a lot of SMEs that I've been working with in my work at CIPD has been focusing on what they're doing and bringing young people in, mentoring them, developing them through apprenticeship schemes and grad schemes, to really bring on their succession planning and their staff of tomorrow.
And Claire, it was very interesting that Claire Crux was talking about having to do more directly with businesses. Businesses just weren't going to come to them.
Exactly. And I think as well there are a lot of graduates now looking for work, so the balance has swung slightly, and the graduates have to be really, really proactive now. And actually, I often get emails from people that are at university still asking, do you need any help with, are you likely to employ somebody? And I always reply, because I always think full marks. This is the right thing to do. You need to start. You need to start before you finish your degree.
Yeah. Well, we're going to move on because time's against us now. We started with Louisa Peacock, the Deputy Women's Editor at the Telegraph, and we're actually going to finish with her because in her previous role she was also the Jobs Editor on the Telegraph. So she's got a lot of sort of useful stuff from both an employer and employee point of view in terms of the dreaded interview.
Before the Telegraph, I used to work at a trade magazine, an employer's trade magazine, so my sort of main beat, if you like, was going and talking to HR directors and talking about recruitment. So not only have I recruited myself, I used to be a news editor on my last mag, so I had to build a team myself, but I've also got that sort of inside info from HR directors on what they look for in recruitment, which is obviously very useful when you yourself are looking for a new job. So yeah, I guess I do have that sort of hat on.
So the sort of people we'll be talking about tonight are, say people from the armed services that are coming back into civilian life, even ex-offenders coming back. What would happen with those sort of people when you encountered them?
I think largely, as long as companies kind of are aware of what they're getting back, I don't actually think there's as much a stigma there, surprisingly, as there is for pregnant women. I think employers tend to sort of get that they can actually offer a lot. I mean, obviously, if you are an ex-offender, I think the large employers are starting to realise actually they can get a huge amount of loyalty out of that kind of potential recruit.
If you were in a position where you were recruiting someone, which I'm sure you have been before, I mean, how difficult is it to put aside what's happening subconsciously in your mind with actually just letting the person speak? Because what I understand, and let's face it, we all do it. You make decisions about people very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And in a recruitment set up for jobs, you have to almost leave that aside to make sure you recruit the right person. Are you aware that happens, or did you have to guard against that sort of thing happening?
Absolutely. I think we're all human at the end of the day, so we can't help but judge other people in the first couple of seconds of seeing them or hearing them. So we can't help that. I think there are things you can do to counteract that, though, and make sure that you have an objective view about the person. That's certainly something I took into consideration. So when I interview people, I always make sure that I ask the same bunch of questions to the candidates, because that's a fair starting point. You'd be amazed at the amount of interviews that don't. They sort of go off on a tangent, and you don't get the chance to answer what they should have answered. But yes, I think it's sort of human nature, unfortunately, that human beings tend to recruit like for like, and I think that's why we're in the state we're in with regards to company boardrooms, because it's traditionally been the white middle class male that has gone and recruited a white middle class male, and it's pretty much the same in politics. And we're in this situation only in 2014, are people sort of saying, oh, okay, that might not be the best way to do that again. Maybe we should sort of pinch ourselves and see if there's another way of getting someone in into the job, and think about different criteria and thinking about different backgrounds. So I think we are all subject to that sort of bias, if you like, but making sure you ask them the same questions, treat them the same, make sure the interview's the same time, length, and then obviously advertising in places where you might pick up a more diverse audience is key, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing discriminatory about that. You can advertise in the main papers or online, but also go to the student unions, go to the sort of church groups, or wherever you think you want to recruit from in your community. Go to the areas that you think you want to represent your community from, and sort of put a bit of effort in, I suppose, and then you'll see that the applications you get back are more diverse rather than just the sort of typical same old.
Same old. Jill, she made some really interesting points, I thought.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think sort of during the course of the hour we've discussed some really interesting topics around these underused talent pools.
Yeah.
I think as employers we need to be developing new strategies to really get the talent and the skills that we're going to need in the future. And there are some clear benefits that our CIPD research have shown from having a diverse workforce. Things like innovation. By not recruiting in our own image, it means we're bringing new ideas into the company. The skills and experience people bring from different walks of life.
Yeah.
And ultimately, are we recruiting people that reflect the diversity of our customer base, which I think definitely helps the business productivity.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Claire?
One of the things actually that Louisa said, which is the kind of top tips if you're going for interviews, I think we actually edited out of the tape, but she said the main things when you're going for interviews are just to do your homework and a firm handshake.
Yes.
So that's the two things that Louisa boiled it down to.
And simple, but very, very true. Wonderful points. Thank you to Dr. Jill Miller, Research Advisor at the CIPD, to Catherine Sermon from Business in the Community, to Claire Crux from the University of Hertfordshire's Career Placement Service, to Richard Watts OBE, Director of Ex-Forces, and of course to Louisa Peacock, not only presenter of Outspoken on Radio Verulam, but of course the Telegraph's Deputy Women's editor. All that remains for me to say is thank you and good night. I hope you enjoyed this special on underused talent. And if you find you can't get the staff, then perhaps maybe you're looking in the wrong place. We'll leave you with that thought for tonight.
You've been listening to The Business on Radio Verulam. If there's anything in the show you want to talk to us about, phone us on 01727 839 926 or email thebusiness@radioverulam.com.